In August of 2020, I took a 3-day excursion in northwest Kansas and southwest Nebraska with 3 of my family members. My brother Kurt organized the trip and did the driving, while my brother Bob, my dad, and I rode along. All of us had a good time viewing the sites we visited, as well as spending some quality time together. Our first stop was in Victoria, Kansas, where we visited the Basilica of St Fidelis, a Romanesque-style Roman Catholic parish commonly known as the Cathedral on the Plains. The church was built between 1908 and 1911. According to the church history, each member of the church who was 12 years of age or older was asked to give $45, as well as haul 6 wagon loads of fence post limestone and 4 loads of sand each year until the church was built. Some families brought as many as 70 to 80 wagon loads of stone. The nickname the Cathedral on the Plains was bestowed upon the structure by former presidential candidate William Jennings Bryan after he visited the town in 1912. Its 48 historic stained glass windows were installed in 1916 by Munich Studios of Chicago at a cost of $3,700 and are now valued at more than $1 million. The church was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1971 as a building of architectural significance. In 2008, the church was named one of the 8 Wonders of Kansas. In 1994, the church began a series of restoration efforts. The congregation spent more than $265,000 on weatherproofing the exterior, replastering and repainting the interior, and updating the sound, electrical, and heating systems. Work also included installing a marble floor in the sanctuary for $60,000 and replacing old carpeting and linoleum floors in other areas. The parish reshingled the church roof in 2006 for $137,000. In 2011, the parking lot and sidewalks were replaced for $225,000, and $70,000 was spent on repairing the plaster ceilings and walls that had cracked with age. In 2013, an Arkansas company replaced the plastic coverings that were installed in the mid-1980s to protect the stained glass windows from Kansas storms. As it aged, the plastic grew opaque. However, the new coverings are made of tempered glass, which will remain clear. Obviously, this church is very beautiful. The church is 220 feet long, 110 feet wide at the transepts, and 75 feet at the nave. Its ceiling is 44 feet above the ground, and the towers rise 141 feet into the air. The seating capacity of 1,100 made it, at the time of its dedication, the largest church west of the Mississippi. The church was raised to the status of a minor basilica in 2014 and is also known as the Basilica of the Plains. As you approach, the cathedral can be seen for many miles across the Kansas plains. The basilica welcomes over 16,000 tourists a year. It is open during daylight hours for anyone wishing to visit. Our second stop on August 18th was the Garden of Eden. This attraction is located in Lucas, Kansas. The Garden of Eden was created by many years of work by S.P. Dinsmore. Samuel Perry Dinsmore was a retired school teacher and Civil War veteran who moved to Lucas, Kansas in 1891. During most of the remaining 31 years of his life, he created an unforgettable legacy in 3 parts. The log cabin was completed in 1907. The logs are up to 27 feet long and are from carved limestone. Dinsmore called the home, quote, the most unique home for living or dead on earth, unquote, and conducted tours of the 11-room house, for a fee, of course. The garden surrounding the home was built during the following 22 years. Built of limestone and 113 tons of concrete, the garden tells the history of the world starting with its creation. There are 150 figures, plus other forms, from insects to 40-foot tall trees in the Garden of Eden. Sunflower Journeys calls it a work of art, a statement of political and religious beliefs, and a record of Kansas history. The pagoda at the northeast corner of the Garden of Eden is a stone and concrete mausoleum. It houses Dinsmore and his first wife in a glass-lidded coffin. Approximately 15,000 people a year visit the Garden of Eden. One of the newer quirky attractions in the neat little community of Lucas is Miller Park Sculptures. Roy and Clara Miller began building a rest stop on Kansas Highway 18 in 1921. Starting in 1932, they added a rock garden and miniature buildings using rocks and shells that they brought home from their travels, and until the 1960s, travelers stopping at Miller Park found rock and concrete sculptures, fresh water, cabins, a playground, and picnic tables. The property was sold in 1969, and the rock sculptures were moved to Hays, Kansas, where they were called Frontier Village. Frontier Village had a short life, and for over 40 years, the Millers Park sculptures sat ignored in a field near Hays, Kansas. The Kohler Foundation, which has worked to save grassroots art in many places, joined with local volunteers to preserve the surviving 45 pieces and return them to a new Millers Park in Lucas. In November of 2013, the Kohler Foundation passed stewardship of Millers Park to the Friends of S.P. Dinsmore's Garden of Eden. The rock and shell hills and buildings are preserved in 2 fenced-off plots just east of the Garden of Eden. We plan to tour the Eisenhower Presidential Library, Museum, and Boyhood Home, located in Abilene, Kansas, later the same day. Due to COVID, the facilities were closed. Though disappointed, we walked around the grounds and admired the beautiful sight. Dwight David Eisenhower was the 34th President of the United States. Mr. Eisenhower served as president from 1953 to 1961. The museum includes Eisenhower's boyhood home, where he lived from 1898 until being appointed to West Point in 1911, and is also the president's final resting place. It is one of the 13 presidential libraries under the auspices of the National Archives and Record Administration. Admission to the Visitor Center, Place of Meditation, Eisenhower's gravesite, and the archives is free, while admission to the museum is $20 for adults and includes a tour of the boyhood home. The complex is open every day except for New Year's Day, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. The Eisenhower Presidential Complex is only one of 2 whose creation preceded the close of a presidency, and while this is obviously the case with the boyhood home, construction of the library itself began in 1958, and the museum portion before he even took office, coinciding with the then general's announcement of his presidential candidacy in June of 1952. As World War II came to an end, local admirers of the supreme commander of Allied forces in Europe, such as Charles L. Brainerd, decided to honor Eisenhower with a museum. In 1945, a nonprofit foundation in his name was created to purchase his boyhood home and build the museum on the same property. It was to house artifacts from veterans and the honors of Eisenhower in particular. At the time, the general's mother, Ida, was still alive and refused to sell the property. When she died in 1946, another purchase attempt was made. However, the fundraising tactics of the foundation offended Eisenhower, and this almost scuttled the project. New fundraising rules were established for the foundation after a discussion with Ike's younger brother Milton, and an agreement by all of the Eisenhower brothers was reached. They ultimately donated the house to the foundation, and the entire site in South Abilene later became the Eisenhower Presidential Center. Mrs. Eisenhower's home opened to the public as a museum on June 22, 1947, and the cornerstone of the Eisenhower World War II Museum was laid in June of 1952 by the general himself, just before he formally announced his candidacy for president. The museum was completed in 1954, and the president was in attendance when it formally opened on November 11th of that year. He was impressed by the results and told the leadership of the foundation that if they could raise the money to build a facility, he would donate his papers and other materials to it. With the fundraising constraints on the foundation still in place in 1954, the Kansas legislature took up the slack, authorizing a separate Eisenhower Presidential Library Commission, and over the next 5 years, enough money was raised to begin construction. Again, President Eisenhower was present when ground was broken on October 13, 1959. The project took 3 years to complete, and Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson joined the retired President Eisenhower at the dedication on May 1st of 1962. On March 28, 1969, President Dwight D. Eisenhower died at Walter Reed Army Hospital in Washington, D.C. The funeral in Abilene took place on the grounds of the Eisenhower Presidential Library and Museum. The service began on the steps of the library and concluded inside the place of meditation where Eisenhower is buried. Located across from the Eisenhower home is the place of meditation, the final resting place of Dwight D. Eisenhower, the 34th President of the United States. In November of 1979, Mamie Dode Eisenhower was interred in the building. Dwight and Mamie's firstborn son, Dode Dwight, was interred in 1966. The place of meditation was built with private funds under the auspices of the Eisenhower Presidential Library Commission. There is a meditation portion of the building where, according to General Eisenhower's wishes, it was hoped that visitors would reflect upon the ideals that made this a great nation and pledge themselves again to continued loyalty to those ideals. President Eisenhower's casket is an $80 government-issue casket, as requested by Eisenhower. The only difference between his casket and those furnished for any soldier buried by the Army is an inner glass seal that costs an extra $115. General Eisenhower was buried in his World War II uniform. Although he was one of the most decorated military men in history, his uniform had only the following medals: Army Distinguished Service Medal with 3 oak leaf clusters, the Navy Distinguished Service Medal, and the Legion of Merit. The vault is bronze and cement. Both Dwight and Mamie's graves are covered with a marble slab. After walking the grounds of the Eisenhower Center, we decided to see if we could tour the Seeley Mansion. Unfortunately, we missed their last tour of the day, but we admired the beautiful property and enjoyed visiting with Terry, the current resident, for a while. The Georgian-style Seeley Mansion is like a time capsule. Most of the home's furnishings were purchased at the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair. The furnishings cost more than the $55,000 that was spent building the 11,000 square feet home. The 25-room Seeley Mansion was built in 1905 for Dr. A.B. Seelye, who made his fortune in patent medicine with the A.B. Seelye Medical Company. The Patent Medicine Museum occupies a former Seelye laboratory, which has been moved to the rear of the mansion. Dr. Seelye's daughters, Helen and Marion, were little girls when the home was built. They never married and lived in the home into their 90s, leaving almost everything right where their mother had placed it. The current owner purchased the mansion in 1981 while they were still alive and shared the Seeley Mansion with them for several years. The electrical fixtures and appliances and most of the furniture and decorative elements are still original. Other items are only 100 years old, added when Frank Lloyd Wright remodeled the Seeley Mansion's interior in the 1920s. The original Edison light fixtures and the old Edison music machines are still in the house, along with a lever-operated bowling alley, which was also purchased at the World's Fair. Here's an interesting fact. Dwight D. Eisenhower delivered ice to the Seeley Mansion when he was a young boy. That evening we ate at Mr. K's Farmhouse Restaurant on the southwest side of Abilene. The location is an old farmhouse that has been converted into an excellent restaurant. I enjoyed the bacon chicken waffles. Yummy. The next morning, August 19th, we headed to Rock City, near Minneapolis, Kansas. Rock City is a park located on hillsides overlooking the Solomon River, approximately 3.5 miles south of Minneapolis. In a patch of prairie about 1,600 feet long and 130 feet wide, Rock City contains 3 clusters of large boulders. These 3 clusters contain a total of 200 spherical boulders. The area has been designated as a National Natural Landmark. The park, owned by a nonprofit corporation, has a visitor center and picnic tables. A small admission fee, which is used to maintain this park, is charged. The large spherical boulders in Rock City are giant calcite cemented concretions, typically called cannonball concretions because of their shape. They range in diameter from 10 to 20 feet, with the average diameter being 12 feet. These concretions lie 6 to 26 feet apart. Similar giant calcite cemented concretions have also been found in a quartzite quarry within Lincoln County and in exposures of similar age sandstones in Utah and Wyoming. In the past, the origin of the spherical boulders found at Rock City had been erroneously interpreted as glacier boulders, corals, concretionary masses of limestone, and normal erosional remnants of sandstone. They were eventually classified as calcite cemented concretions. They formed as a result of diffusion of calcium through and the precipitation of calcite within the sandstone containing them after being deeply buried. After the formation of the concretions, differential erosion of the considerably softer sandstone surrounding them exposed them as freestanding boulders. They are certainly an unusual sight, and we enjoyed walking among them and climbing on them. We stopped in Cawker City, Kansas to view an oddity, the world's largest ball of twine. Local resident Frank Stober created the ball that had 1.6 million feet of sisal twine. The ball was 11 foot in diameter when he died in 1974. Cawker City built an open-air gazebo over Stober's ball where every August a twine-a-thon is held and more twine is added to the ball. By 2006, the twine ball had reached a circumference of 40 feet. It weighed 17,886 pounds, or 8.9 tons, and contained 7,801,766 feet, or 1,477.6 miles of twine. In December of 2018, its weight was estimated as 20,511 pounds. At that time, the ball contained 8,230,347 feet of twine. If you were to begin walking west while unrolling the twine, you would reach the Pacific Ocean, and a fair-sized ball of twine would still be left to unwind. Due to periodic additions, it is still growing. This neat little station was located across the street from the ball of twine. Our next stop was at the geographic center of the contiguous United States, located near Lebanon, Kansas. The geographic center of the contiguous United States, as located in a 1918 survey, is located at 39 degrees 50 minutes north and 98 degrees 35 minutes west. This location is about 2.6 miles northwest of the center of Lebanon and approximately 12 miles south of the Kansas-Nebraska border. In 1918, the Coast and Geodetic Survey found this location by balancing on a point a cardboard cutout shaped like the United States. This method was accurate to within 20 miles, but while the Geodetic Survey no longer endorses any location as the center of the United States, the identification of Lebanon, Kansas has remained. Any measurement of the exact center of a landmass will always be imprecise due to changing shorelines and other factors. The NGS coordinates are recognized in a historical marker in a small park at the intersection of Road AA and K191. It is accessible by a turnoff from U.S. Route 281. This location is different from the geographic center of the United States, which reflects the 1959 additions of the states of Alaska and Hawaii, which is located at a point northeast of Belfouche, South Dakota. In order to protect the privacy of the landowner where the point identified by the 1918 survey falls, a proxy marker was erected in 1940 about a half-mile away. An American flag usually flies atop a pole placed on the monument. A covered picnic area and the U.S. Center Chapel, a small 8-pew chapel, are nearby. Our next stop was Minden, Nebraska. When visiting downtown Minden for breakfast, we noticed two interesting buildings. This is the Minden Opera House. Constructed in 1891, the Minden Opera House was viewed as a historical tribute to area arts and culture. It was completely renovated in 1999 and 2000 to serve as a center for both the community and the region. The Minden Opera House hosts first-rate performances by the Minden community players, but it also brings in high-quality performances by professional artists from all over the world. This beautiful building is the Kearney County Courthouse. Minden is probably most famous as the site of Pioneer Village. I had visited the museum many years before and enjoyed it, and this visit was also very interesting. Pioneer Village is one of the nation's best planned and most comprehensive collections of Americana, covering the period from 1830 to the present. The large museum also includes a restaurant, a gift shop, a motel complex, and a campground big enough for the most sophisticated RVs and small enough for puff tents. Open since 1953, Pioneer Village is a one-of-a-kind. If you can think of some type of collection, it is probably here. The display items are well arranged so they can all be seen by walking less than a mile. You may stroll as you wish around the facilities. It would take a couple days to really absorb all the collections in the displays. Pioneer Village is open daily. The museum is located at the intersection of U.S. Highway 34 and Nebraska Highway 10 in Minden. Pioneer Village was founded by Harold Warp, a Chicago manufacturer from Minden. The museum comprises a complex of 28 buildings on 20 acres, with a total collection of over 50,000 items. The museum has a large collection of items from 1830 to the present, including frontier buildings, early cars and airplanes, of which more than 350 are on display, a Wurlitzer Caliola, tractors and farm equipment, and an art collection. The Great Platte River Road Archway Monument is a monument on Interstate 80 located 3 miles east of Kearney, Nebraska. Opened in July of 2000, it houses an historical experience that tells the story of Nebraska and the Platte River Valley in the development of America. The monument spans more than 300 feet above Interstate 80 and is accessible via exits 275 and 272. A monument and tourist attraction highlighting the history of the Platte River Valley was a goal of former Governor Frank B. Morrison. In 1997, $60 million in bonds were issued and purchased by investors. On July 16, 2000, the archway opened to the public. Nearly 250,000 people visited in each of the first 2 years. But these numbers were far short of projections, and the monument was forced to reduce expenses and refinance its bond payments in 2002. While a shift in focus on educational and group tours briefly presented the monument with more stable financial footing, attendance dwindled, counting less than 50,000 visitors in 2012. The archway filed for bankruptcy protection in March of 2013. As part of the resolution of the bankruptcy filing, the archway is managed by the city of Kearney. I-80 exit 275, adjacent to the archway, was completed in August of 2013, directly east of the museum at a cost of about $20 million. In December 2013, the museum announced a 2-month closure to rebrand itself following its debt ruling. The archway reopened on March 1st of 2014. The archway reached its first profitable year in 2017. Since prehistoric times, the trail along the Platte River through Nebraska, which came to be known as the Great Platte River Road, has been a thoroughfare for travel across the continent. The Archway Museum details the stories of the pioneers, adventurers, and innovators who have traveled the trail since the mid-1800s and helped to build America. The exhibit starts at Fort Kearney in 1848 and features sections on the Oregon Trail, California Trail, and Mormon Trail that converged at nearby Fort Kearney before heading west. As visitors progress through the exhibit, the displays of different time periods feature a prairie schooner wagon on the Oregon Trail, a buffalo stampede, the Mormon handcart expedition, a 49ers campsite, the Pony Express, the Transcontinental Telegraph, a stagecoach, the Transcontinental Railroad, the first Transcontinental Highway, the Lincoln Highway, and today's Transcontinental Highway I-80. The exhibit ends with a replica drive-in and 1950s-style cafe with windows providing views over the interstate. The exhibits are featured in chronological order and reflect the historical developments that occurred on the Great Platte River Road. Fort McPherson National Cemetery is a U.S. national cemetery located 4 miles south of the village of Maxwell in Lincoln County, Nebraska. Administered by the United States Department of Veterans Affairs, Fort McPherson National Cemetery is the only national cemetery in the state of Nebraska. In October of 1863, the U.S. government established a fort near Cottonwood Canyon, roughly 5 miles south of present-day Maxwell. Soldiers stationed at this location near the Platte River and the Overland Trail protected settlers moving westward to Colorado and provided security for the construction of the railroad. Originally named Fort McKean, the fort had its name changed to Fort McPherson in 1866 to honor Union General James McPherson, who died during the 1864 Battle of Atlanta. In 1873, a national cemetery was established at the site of the fort. The initial purpose of the cemetery was to provide an appropriate burial ground for remains of soldiers at remote, abandoned posts on the western frontier. The military transferred remains from post cemeteries in Wyoming, Colorado, South Dakota, and Nebraska. Early interments also included the remains of 6 men from Company F of the 3rd U.S. Cavalry. The soldiers died in May of 1873 when a flash flood swept through their campsite in the Republican River Valley. As conflicts with Indian groups dissipated in the late 1870s, so did the need for a military presence in the area. The U.S. military abandoned the fort in 1880, selling the fort's buildings at local auction but retaining the National Cemetery property. The cemetery today contains more than 13,000 interments. The cemetery is enclosed by wrought iron fencing with large vehicular gates supported by stone piers, all constructed in 1941. Just inside the main gate is the cemetery's oldest building, the Superintendent's Lodge, built in 1876. A white marble monument marks the mass grave of 28 soldiers killed in an 1854 encounter with the Sioux at Fort Laramie in Wyoming Territory. Commonly referred to as the Groton Massacre, the incident is considered the starting point of hostilities between the United States and the Sioux Nation. The hostilities ended in 1890 with the massacre at Wounded Knee, South Dakota. Fort McPherson National Cemetery is the final resting place for 4 recipients of the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military decoration. Other significant interments include 63 Buffalo soldiers from the 9th and 10th U.S. Cavalry. These African American soldiers served in the West during the Indian Wars after the Civil War. The soldiers, originally interred to Fort Robinson, Nebraska, were transferred to Fort McPherson National Cemetery in 1947 when the fort was deactivated. The busy crossroads of the Eisenhower Memorial Interstate System and the Veterans of Foreign Wars Memorial Highway is the perfect location for the 20th Century Veterans Memorial. The Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard, as well as the volunteers of the North Platte Canteen, are memorialized by bronze statues. The 5 major conflicts of the 20th century, from World War I to the First Iraq War, are depicted in the 15-foot-tall brick bas-relief mural. The memorial features a walk of honor, lined by thousands of commemorative bricks showing the names of veterans who served at any time during the 20th century. Adjacent to the memorial of our military heroes is the Lincoln County Law Enforcement Memorial that pays homage to those brave men and women who have lost their lives in the line of duty protecting the public as officers sworn to uphold the law. Lincoln County has lost 11 officers in the line of duty since 1916. The governing body of the Law Enforcement Memorial asks visitors to stop, remember, and honor all the officers that were killed in the line of duty as they bravely served our communities. The Golden Spike Tower offers guests a bird's-eye view of the world's largest railroad classification yard. The idea of the Golden Spike Tower and the Visitor Center was first conceived in the mid-1990s as Union Pacific's viewing platform was falling into disrepair. Community leaders thought it was a good idea to erect a tower that would allow visitors to get a bird's-eye view of Bailey Yard. The Golden Spike Tower and Visitor Center opened on June 26, 2008. On the grounds of the Golden Spike Tower and Visitor Center is a vintage dining car currently being renovated. When completed, the car will take you back to the romance of passenger trains with both the look and feel of a real railroad dining car with all the amenities. The 8th floor of the Golden Spike Tower is fully enclosed, with a 360-degree view of Bailey Yard. From the vantage point of the Golden Spike's 8th floor, you get a bird's-eye view of the world's largest classification yard as you watch trains taken apart and rebuilt into new trains. While on the 8th floor, retired railroad employees explain what is taking place in Bailey Yard and tell stories and experiences of their time working for the Union Pacific Railroad. The 7th floor of the tower is an open-air viewing platform. The Golden Spike Tower and Visitor Center features a courtyard proudly flying the 23 flags representing each state the Union Pacific Railroad serves. Union Pacific's Bailey Yard in North Platte, Nebraska, is the largest rail classification yard in the world. Named in honor of former Union Pacific President Ed H. Bailey, the massive yard covers 2,850 acres, reaching a total length of 8 miles. The yard is located in the midst of key east-west and north-south corridors on the busiest freight rail line in America, making it a critical component of Union Pacific's rail network. Bailey Yard has 17 receiving and 16 departure tracks, handling 14,000 rail cars every 24 hours. 3,000 cars are sorted daily in the yard's eastward and westward yards, nicknamed hump yards, using a mound cresting 34 feet for eastbound trains and 20 feet for those heading west. The hump yards allow 4 cars a minute to roll gently into any of 114 bowl tracks. Here they become part of trains headed for destination in the east, west, and Gulf coasts of America, as well as the Canadian-Mexican borders. An average of 139 trains per day, largely comprised of raw and finished goods such as automobiles, coal, grain, corn, sugar, chemicals, and steel, along with consumer goods including electronics, apparel, and other retail products, are sorted. The train operations and repair shops at Bailey Yard are open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The fueling and service center processes more than 8,500 locomotives each month, using technology like overhead cranes and elevated work bays to maintain efficient operations. The on-site car repair facility annually replaces 10,000 pairs of wheels, many identified through an in-motion defect detector using ultrasound technology to inspect the wheel. This detector was developed by Union Pacific and is the only one in the world. Some wheel repairs even take place without the rail car ever leaving the track, minimizing downtime. All train movement through Bailey Yard is handled through on-site command center with the latest computerized control systems. Buffalo Bill Ranch State Historical Park, known as Scouts Rest Ranch, is located west of North Platte, Nebraska. The ranch was established in 1878 with an initial purchase of 160 acres south of the Union Pacific tracks by William Buffalo Bill Cody. The 4,000-acre ranch was sold in 1911 and has been under the management of the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission since 1964. The 25-acre historic state park was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1978 and designated a National Historic Landmark in 2021. Open weekdays from April to October, the house and outbuildings can be toured, including a museum documenting Cody's life from a Pony Express rider to his Wild West shows. In 1877, Cody contacted Major Frank North, the leader of the Pawnee Scouts, who was living in Sidney, Nebraska. Cody founded the Cody-North Partnership with the North brothers to form a cattle business. North found land along the Dismal River 65 miles north of North Platte, on which cattle could graze and a ranch could be built. Cody continued touring his Buffalo Bill's Wild West show while North purchased cattle at the north end of the Texas Cattle Trail near Ogallala, Nebraska. North hired cowboys to help operate the ranch while Cody was on tour. The ranch grew in size to encompass 7,000 acres. 2,500 acres were planted alfalfa and 2,500 were corn. In cooperation with Isaac Dillon, a neighboring rancher, Cody and Dillon built a 12-mile irrigation ditch capable of watering 6,000 acres of crops. This property was financially viable for Cody. By the 1800s, however, other homesteaders had begun to move into the area of Nebraska and had taken grazing land. In 1882, the Cody North ranching operation ended and was bought out by John Bratt. In 1878, Cody began buying land surrounding North Platte. The first purchase of land was 160 acres for $750 south of the Union Pacific tracks. Cody purchased nearly 4,000 more acres adjacent to North Platte. At the time, the area was a treeless prairie. Cody had land in Kansas that had many tall, established trees, and he wanted trees on his new ranch. Al Goodman, his brother-in-law, discovered water absorption issues were why trees would not grow on his new property. Goodman planted many cottonwood and box elder trees around the property that were able to withstand the conditions. The ranch now has many growing trees. Cody's wife Louisa and their daughters moved to North Platte in February of 1878. They monitored the property where Cody wanted to retire. Cody showed his new land and brought out family, friends, and celebrities. These guests, along with his family, spent time with the cowboys employed on the ranch. The ranch grew with the help of the Goodmans, who managed the ranch and managed the high-grade livestock and thoroughbred horses. The ranch was operated with 80 horses and 30 men, rising to 60 men in the busy seasons. When the trees grew, the southern portion of the ranch turned into a wooded park with deer, several young buffaloes, and a large lake. This area of land would be called Scouts Rest Ranch. Cody had the words Scouts Rest Ranch painted on the roof of the large barn so that it could be read from the Union Pacific tracks a mile away. The ranch was revolutionary for the time. Cody imported many blooded cattle and thoroughbred horses at a time when the practice was not common. The land was transformed from a treeless prairie to a forested area. Despite advances in profitable years, operating costs were high, and Cody sold the ranch in 1911 for $100,000. The original two-story house was built in 1886 for Al and Julia Goodman, Cody's sister and brother-in-law who managed the ranch. The house was built by Patrick Walsh, a native of North Platte, for $3,900. In 1964, the house was purchased by the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission as part of the process for making Scouts Rest Ranch a state historical park. The Lincoln County Historical Society was organized to help raise money for the purchase. The group raised $37,500, and the Nebraska Game and Parks Commission covered the other $75,000 required for the purchase. Another $90,000 was spent on restoring the grounds and buildings. Since 1964, the State Historical Park has been open to the public. On the day we visited, renovations to the home were in progress again.